friends. Welcome to Flosstube and Variety Show number 77. This is April 21st, 2023. I'm Emilie Williams in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and thanks so much for joining me. Yes, I went through that whole thing without wondering what number it was, what date it was, all of that. It's been 2 weeks though since I made a video, so you would think that I would have tons to show, lots of progress and so on. And there's a fair heap of things around in front of me on this table. I guess nothing's behind me today, but I've been gone I was gone for 4 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 5 days. So it's almost as if it's only been 1 week in terms of my normal activities since I last made a video, which, oh well. Hopefully you'll find something of interest here. Flosstube means cross stitch and other similar things having to do with embroidery floss. That's why the floss part. And variety show means something else. So we'll see. We'll see what it is. I'll dive right into cross stitch. I'm going to show you a bit of Winter Rose Manor by With Thy Needle and Thread, Brenda Gervais. So I'm going to show you that I've started on the house, which is here in the bottom part of that plant, having finished the fence and this part of the snow and up to those steps, I think. Yeah, in fact, I started the steps in order to be sure I was getting the house in the right spot. So you can see I just took it out of the hoop. Now, okay, so here's my dilemma, because there always seems to be a dilemma. I can, on the camera, just see that the house is a different color floss than the snow. And now in the picture, the house has a little bit of a hint of pink to it. But in the actual cross stitch, in the threads, it's not very pink. And one of you in a comment said something that you were changing the color of the house to something that was pinker. I certainly understand why you would do that. I don't know enough about the different, I don't have a local needlework shop that I can go and look at the different Gentle Arts or Weeks Dye Works floss in order to pick one that's pinker without being brilliantly pink. So I'm going with what the designer says. Now I did also see on let's see, who would that have been that I watched? Oh, I think it was Carol Saltbuck's Stitcher on YouTube, her most recent video. She talks about the fact that the colors of these different overdyed flosses are not consistent. And I will say, I do like my DMC because it is extremely consistent. Most colors, not only from week to week or from Michael's to Joann's, but over decades, very consistent. But I said I was going to trust the designer on that and a couple of other things, and so I will. But I do like DMC, I do. Now, the other thing I am going to show you from last time I made a video, I think it was last time, or maybe it was 2 times ago, because I think last time I didn't have time or will to do anything about it. So this is Sampler 193 by 2x2 Stitch Art, and I'm doing this in DMC 777 on 16 count Aida. And you can see, if you remember, there used to be a central medallion thing there. And you can just see, especially depending on the light, a red shadow of it So this is what I'm talking about, this central part right here. That's where I started stitching. And I found when I came around to, you know, I started there and I went up to the edge and I came over here and then I was coming back to it and I found that it was different. So I did this, went into the corner. I was not hitting it in the correct spot, and it was because that medallion was wrong. And as you may remember, I debated about whether I was going to take it out and restitch it now, or whether I was going to wait until I had made my way all the way around the whole thing and then restitch it, or maybe make my way around the whole thing and decide not to restitch it. Well, I decided to take it out because in this kind of stitching, I'm very much a landmark stitcher. So I look at things that are already stitched and count over from them rather than doing a fresh count from, I don't know, the edge of the pattern or something. And I was just afraid that I would make another mistake if I based anything on that. So I took it out. It took a long time to take it out. Now, how did I take it out? I have a pair of very sharp embroidery scissors, as most of us do. And they were right here. Here they are. These are not as sharp as embroidery scissors come. Some other kind, special kind, is sharper, but this is a Ginger pair. It's nice. I have a pair of tweezers. I use the needle. I use this other kind of snips, sort of. I tried to use something I bought at the quilt show for this purpose, for this kind of use, which ought to be excellent. It's, you see that little, maybe you can see it there. It's that little curved thing that you would imagine you would slip under the stitch and be able to snip it. But I found that that is not well made enough to slip under the stitches of 16 count Aida. In fact, I'm not sure it would slip under stitches easily of 14 count Aida. So that is kind of useless. But I just did it carefully, slowly. One key and I did not cut the fabric, which is always the worry, isn't it? One key is that when you put your scissor tip under the thread that you're going to cut, first of all, I did it from the front because the stitches are longer. The diagonal, the second leg of the diagonal is longer. And then once you've cut that layer, you can cut the first leg of the diagonal, and that's right next to the fabric. But if you slip your scissors tip under the stitch and then far enough so that you can see that tip again, then you're very unlikely to have picked up a thread of the fabric itself. And I'll say, especially with Aida, I think it's unlikely. I haven't actually removed stitches from linen. I don't stitch on linen tons. So I haven't used scissors to remove stitches from linen. Boy, those are all hard words to say for some reason. But I didn't cut the fabric. It was kind of discouraging to do that, but I know I'll be able to stitch it up again pretty quickly. So that is what I did. I did that Wednesday. It was, in fact, most of my stitching on Wednesday was actually not stitching, was unstitching, was reverse stitching, taking that out. But I did start on Wednesday, which was the 19th, and I had promised that I would start this on the 20th, but I couldn't help myself. I started the Cuckoo Bird sampler by Heart in Hand Needleart. Now this one, as you may remember, this pattern just came out, I think this year. Is that right? I think so. But the designer's note on the back says, "For Brenda and Laura, who inspire creativity and connection in our community," referring to Brenda and the Serial Starter YouTube channel, of course. And anyway, I'm starting that. I am using DMC ecru, 1 strand, on 20 count red cedar by Cedar River Linen and Design, which is Trixie Tricycle on YouTube. Anyway, that's the beginning, the first few letters. I think that's 2 or 3 strands of thread. And I think my next move on that is going to be to go on down to the RST, to this line, and then maybe go down to that line. But I might get far enough over that I can start the bird, because the bird is a lot of solid stitching. And the letters don't take very long, really. The bird will take longer. But I think overall this will be a fairly quick stitch, and it's fun. Now, the one interesting thing is that the pattern, of course, it calls for Weeks Dye Works Bark or DMC 3021. I didn't look up what, whoops, I'm not supposed to show that, sorry. I did not look up what Weeks, or what DMC 3021 was. Let me just see if I have it right here. I don't think so, but you never know. Oh, look, I do. So this is sort of a, you can't really tell, it's sort of a dull brown. Well, in this are some little beads, because down here, the berries on this branch are actually little beads. And they're beads that more or less match this brown color. Well, I'm not using brown thread. I'm using the DMC ecru on the red, and that was not something I'd thought about in terms of how am I going to decide on what to do with the beads. So I'll decide, I'll think about it. I would be very happy to just make some French knots. I like French knots, and save the beads for something else. I don't think I probably would put these brown beads on with the ecru thread on this red fabric, or brick colored, cedar colored. Actually, red cedar is a very good name for this color. It does remind me of the color of cedar wood, like in a cedar chest. So anyway, that's fun. That will be fun to do. And the other thing I did was, as I had mentioned, might be the last video, I was going to start one of the samplers from the Nicola Parkman birthday box, Letters from Europe. And so I have started this one, Mathilde, which is from France. And this is, I wanted to start with it because it was both red and blue, and I was waiting for a choice of blue threads to come in. Again, not being able to just go and look at the display and pick something. I had to choose a few. So what I ended up choosing was these two. And this is Just the Ticket linen. I mean, not linen, it's 20 count Aida, but it's Just the Ticket by Tabby Cat Linen. This is not the linen that's called for in that chart. I think that one is creme brulee. I don't really like that much distressed look on linen. I'm willing to have some amount of variegation in it, but I don't like that much. But anyway, this is Just the Ticket, which is pretty uniformly golden color. I can't get the light to show what it is. And then these are the two colors of thread that I am choosing. And this red was in the birthday box. This is number 779. And this blue I ordered. And this is number 313. It's sort of a medium dark blue and bright red. Auvert Soie 103 on 20 count Aida, which is equivalent of 40 count linen. And this is the size. This is, I did the top border. It's 261 stitches wide. So that's that. And it goes down 150 something stitches. So it'll go down to about here. So it's not quite centered on the fabric. Oh well, I think it'll be okay. I think there's enough room for framing, enough excess. I just wanted to see, how the coverage was, so I started on some of those little borders in the letters. I think it's fine. And I wanted to see how big it was, so I made that whole border. Now you may be able to see on the camera, my method for counting a long string of stitches in a line is to make, especially if it's not, well, only if it's not variegated thread. If it is variegated thread, then I would cross each stitch. I would complete each stitch before going on to the next one, and I would find some other way to mark it, which I'll mention in a moment what way that might be. But in this case, because it's a solid red thread, I just made all the crosses or all the, the first leg of the stitch all the way down, and then came back to finish it. And I crossed every 10th stitch. Now I did that on Eliza Stringer age 6 also, which was also 100.3 silk, and that was 46 count linen. And it worked okay. I mean, you can, if you knew I did that, you might be able to tell that I had done it by just looking at the resulting stitching, but not enough to bother me at all, because counting to 261 multiple times would be very annoying. Now, the other way I have done this in the past is I take another thread, a contrasting sewing thread, and I sort of make a basting line where I go down and I make a little sideways stitch at every 10 stitches. And so I do that before I do the actual cross stitch. So I've already marked out the dimensions of the piece with this sewing thread, and then I just do the cross stitching without having to think about it too much. Now what I did here is when I got to the center to 130, can you see that? I happen to have some white thread handy, so I just made a few stitches of white sewing thread just there. White will not leave any color behind when it's taken out of the fabric, and it just let me know this is the center, because I was stitching a hoop, and as I moved the hoop, I would lose track of how far I had gone. So, but anyway, again, Mathilde, France. Yeah, looking forward to that. I think it's cute. I mean, we'll see when we get there. Here she has this little coffee pot. Where am I? Yeah. This little coffee pot right here, and here's a key, just sort of random, but it may have meant something to her. Now this booklet, normally in the Hands Across the Sea booklets, there's some information about the person, whatever Nicola or others could research about the person, but there's nothing. She doesn't give her last name. She doesn't give the year. I personally would guess in the late 1800s for this. Oh, just remember there's something else I was going to show. You know what? I'm going to stop the video and go get that thing and come back. So one moment. I'm back. I forgot that I had also worked on, I had also worked on Emilie Kalwar, Hands Across the Sea. And this date on here is 1890, which that's one of the reasons I sort of think Mathilde might be from the late 1800s. There's a certain, I don't know, they remind me of each other, sort of. But I did work on this. I think last time I had, very little done really, a part of the top borders and a few letters. But you see, I've finished those top borders and made my way 2/3 of the way across on the letters. I really do enjoy this. And I will say, again, as in so many things, if I am looking at this up close, I find things wrong with it or things I don't like as well. But when I look at it on the camera, or I look at it from the distance that you normally see it when it's framed in on the wall, I like it better. This is 18 count white clay, I think. Aida dyed by Fox and Rabbit. And I'm using the called for DMC threads. So that was very fun to do. Having been gone, I'd forgotten that I'd worked on that a fair amount before I left. So now, normally, as you know, well, as you may know, I'll tell you, I sort of had made a commitment that I was going to show one or the other, alternating my full coverage projects every other video. Now, in the back of my mind, I think, well, I should have made progress in order to do that. And because of being gone and other things going on in my non-stitching life, I made very little progress on, it would have been Under the Roof's turn this time. I made very little progress, so I'm not showing it. I think I did put in, a couple hundred stitches, but a couple hundred gray stitches don't show up that much. Now, coming up, I'm going to be gone again. Next Friday, I'm not making a video because I'll be out of town. I will make a video the following Friday, then the Friday after that, I won't make a video because I'll be out of town. So I think I'm going to not make any promises to myself or to you about showing the full coverage projects. And we'll just see when I get back into more of a rhythm later in May if I start showing them regularly. Now, in this past couple of weeks, well, about 8 or 9 months ago, a friend of mine died. She and her husband, friends of mine from church. And I knew that she was a quilter and did other kinds of crafts, as many of us do. Isn't that right? And her husband came up to me at one point and said, I have been going through some of Dean's things and some of them might be of interest to you. So would you mind if I brought you a bag of things from her sewing room? I said, be delighted. I would be delighted. So he did last week. Now, the interesting thing is, I expected a stack of fabric and a little bit of other things. But what it turned out to be was a lot of other things and a little bit of fabric. And a lot of the fabric wasn't really useful to me, I'm sorry to say. It wasn't cotton, or I was fairly sure it wasn't cotton. She did a lot of sewing. She made herself clothing. She had some grandchildren that she made things for. And she did make some quilts, which were in the things that her husband gave me. And so they're set aside for the time being. But not a ton of quilting stuff really available from her. But I was amazed at how much cross stitch there was. And it was most of it was cross stitch that she had finished and never framed. And most of it was things that had no meaning for me, really. But a few things of hers I kept. And partly because I think they're useful as a memento of her, but also because they're pretty in their own right. So there's a series of patterns, apparently. I don't know where the patterns are, but this is Daisy. Isn't that nice? I mean, I could picture these coming out of a book or I think that's quite nice. Iris. Oh, and her backs. I haven't really examined this to see whether she tied her threads off at all. Don't know, but this is 14 count Aida. These are done on Rose. I think that's pretty. Again, I mean the back. I have to really examine to see if those are anchored firmly enough to trim them off. And I don't know what she intended to do, whether she intended to frame them or not. Other things that she had stitched weren't framed. So I'm not sure. But then there's this, which I think is quite pretty. And the way this is centered on the fabric, and there's plenty of fabric at the top, makes me wonder if she was going to make a bell pull or something out of it. And this is not all cross stitch. I mean, most of it is, but then, I mean, down here, I don't know the name of that stitch right there, but that's quite nice. Some back stitch. From what I can tell, it's complete. And it's pretty good shape. You know, it's not stained or anything. The colors make me think of the 90s, you know, the Wedgwood blue, colonial blue, dusty rose colors. I certainly stitch things in those colors. But that I definitely am going to hang on to. One of the things I thought about for this, because it's so long, is to set it off, you know, to put some fabric on either side of it, and then use it around a central, I'd say dowel, but I think a dowel is not the size I want. I'm thinking of, you know, a mailing tube or something, and making a project roll where completed projects could be rolled up around this thing, and it would have this on the outside. I think that would be really pretty. So another thing that was in her collection of things were a couple of books of embroidery stitches. Now this one is just, let's see, I don't think I found a date in this, did I? I'm just going to look and see if I have a date. Oh yes, 1964, 35 cents, 100 embroidery stitches. This is really nice. You know, Coates and Clark's put out these things, and it talks about, it shows how to make them and where to put the needle and what your guidelines are going to be, how to turn the corner. I mean, it starts simple and goes complicated. Really nice little book. And then this one, A to Z of embroidery stitches. And this has color illustrations of how to do things. A lot of interesting stitches, including how to use ribbon, French knots with ribbon, other types of stitching, and it talks quite a bit about what guidelines to, what you need to mark. You know, if you need little dots or if you need a line or whatever. Here it shows sort of cast, I mean, it's called cast on stitch. So it's almost like knitting or crochet or something. So anyway, using a needle and thread, very interesting. I definitely was happy to have this book, and I'll look through it and practice. I mentioned another previous video that I probably am not going to finish the satin stitch little items from the Jenny box of 2021 because I'm just not good enough. But I might use that thread that was provided, which is not DMC, and I don't think it's 100% cotton, to practice. Just, you know, get out a piece of muslin or something and practice some embroidery stitches using these books and learn something. So that's kind of fun. Now, where I went last weekend was to Edmonds, Washington, which is near Seattle. I flew in and out of Seattle to visit my aunt. My aunt is 95. She lives alone. She attends classes at the local Center for Creative Retirement Institute. She, you know, is part of the theater, local theater scene there. She's been on the play selection committee for 10 or more years with one of the local theaters. And I mean, theater is her background, one of her many backgrounds. So I went out to see her and to see my cousin, her daughter and husband, and their daughter, that is my cousin. And we had a very nice time. We went to the Tulip Festival. Now in Skagit Valley, Washington, which is there just north of Seattle, about an hour north of Seattle, tulips are grown commercially. And you may not sort of think about how tulips are grown. Well, they're grown in big fields the way other crops are grown. And in the springtime, the fields bloom the way crops do, except it's tulips, and it's mile and mile and mile of tulips. So I may put a picture in here of the tulip fields that we saw. They were before a lot of the different varieties were out. You know, there's a range of time that tulips bloom, and we were there on the early side. But we also saw they had display beds of different types of tulips, and more were out that you could see close up in the display beds than appeared to be out in the fields far away. But as you'll see, there are plenty of tulips out, and it was a gray day, a little bit of drizzle just as we were leaving. Not that warm in Skagit Valley, Washington this past weekend, but very, very beautiful and nice to see. And I took some close-ups of tulips because I like to. Now, my aunt is a knitter. That is one of her hobbies. She has knit many sweaters for her late husband and for other people, including myself, my husband. So there's a yarn shop in town that I think she had never been to. So we went, and it's not just a yarn shop, it's a dyeing and spinning shop. That's another thing they do. Well, it's called Stranded by the Sea, and Stranded by the Sea, I think that's a very clever name. And I, as you know, I do knit. That is, I know how to knit. And some months ago, I showed you a knitting project. I showed it 2 different times because I was trying to get it going. Finally, I got it going, but I didn't take it with me out there because it requires counting and remembering if I'm doing this type of increase or that type of increase or this type of decrease or that type of decrease, and paying attention. And I was not sure that I would be able to pay attention because when my aunt and I are together, we do a lot of chatting, and you know, you want to pay attention to the person you're with. So I just took a simple project. This is basically lace weight yarn. And this is Cascade. The brand is Cascade Yarns, and it happens to be from that area. The company is up there. This is 51% silk and 49% merino wool, and it's really nice. Very nice. Very nice feel of it. I had some purple. I have some purple still, but I knit my daughter-in-law a lace scarf. This is just garter stitch. It's kind of wide. It's very lightweight, and so I feel that if it's wide, then you can just drape it over your shoulders. If it's a little chilly in the room, or if you want to use it as a scarf, it scrunches up and will be a nice scarf. So I was just knitting that to have something to do when I was with my aunt. Now, this is normally you knit this weight of yarn on size 1, 2, or 3 needles. I'm using size 5 because I wanted it to be very drapey and very loose. I didn't want it to be tight or dense. But of course, at this yarn shop, because I don't have enough yarn, which is not true, and because I don't have enough to do, which is really not true, I bought some more yarn. But I mean, really, isn't that beautiful? I bought 2 skeins because 1 skein might not be enough. And this is Urth Yarns. This is the brand Urth. And it's called Uneek Fingering Weight. And the suggested needle size for this is US size 1 to 3, which is the same as this lace weight shows, but I'm using 5 for that. And depending on what I make, I probably would make a, for myself, a scarf and hat, if I make it for myself. Who else would want it, I wonder? Who else loves purple? I mean, this is a gorgeous, gorgeous purple, and, you know, a little teal and a little olive green accent and a little mulberry type accent in there. Really, really pretty yarn. Scarf and hat. Now, this is North Carolina. So I do wear a scarf and hat. Every winter I wear one at least a dozen times in the course of the winter. But it's not a major thing the way it is up north of North America. But I was really glad to get this yarn. I've bought yarn when I've been with my aunt before, and I've made some things out of it. It's just what one does when in Rome and so forth. And really, if I go into a yarn shop, I can't leave without buying something, almost. I almost can't. So it's fine. So that is all that I have around me right now. So was it really a variety show? A little bit, right? Because someone else is stitching and embroidery stitches and yarn knitting. That's not Flosstube. That's not pure Flosstube. So that's what it was today. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you found something of interest. I have no idea how long this video is because pausing it in the middle means my timer started over. So I hope it's not too long. Again, I will not be back next week on Friday. I will be back the following week, I expect, on Friday. Then I won't be back the following week on Friday, and I will after that. And I don't anticipate not making a video for most of the weeks of the rest of May and June and July. I don't think we have any kind of major plans to be gone. So what would happen, what would keep me from making a video is if I decided that I just am too busy, or if something comes up that makes me too busy to do any amount of stitching that would be of interest to show. But in any case, I hope that you enjoy your stitching and whatever beautiful, hopefully springish, spring-like weather you have going on in your part of the woods, or autumn weather if you're south of the equator. And many blessings to you, friends.